we may be beginning to see the end of a two-party system.
One of the big lessons coming out of the 2016 election is just how unhappy people are with this two-party system. And this unhappiness is now beginning to rise to the top, with leaders in both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party acknowledging that this two-party system isn't working for everybody, and that it may give way to a multi-party system. So this week, John Kasich, the Republican governor of Ohio, and John Hickenlooper, the Democratic governor of Colorado, were both on ABC's This Week, and they talked about this. So I'm going to have 3 clips to show you here, and then I'm going to show you how this, or try to describe how this ties into Canadian politics, where I'll give you an example of how our multi-party system is benefiting the people of the country. So first, let's get to the first clip of John Kasich talking about the unhappiness with this two-party system.
We may be beginning to see the end of a two-party system. I'm starting to really wonder if we're going to see a multi-party system at some point in the future in this country, because I don't think either party is answering people's deepest concerns and needs.
So while I don't agree with John Kasich on pretty much anything when it comes to policy, I think he's absolutely correct in his assessment of the two-party system here, and that this anger and resentment towards this two-party system might result in a system where there will be multiple parties rising up. And while he has, this is my issue with John Kasich. He's right on what the problem is, but I think from what I've seen him in other interviews, he thinks the solution is to be somewhere in the center between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. What he fails to realize is that the Democratic Party is the center and that the Republican Party is the far right. The problem is that there isn't a party that actually represents the left. And right now, that's where a lot of the anger and excitement is. Because when you look at poll numbers on actual policy issues like Medicare for All or raising taxes on the wealthy and on corporations, people poll progressive on those issues. The vast majority of people want a Medicare for All system, and the vast majority of people want higher taxes on large corporations and on the wealthy. So I don't think John Kasich has the solution to the problem, but I think he is aware and or I think he is right in terms of his assessment on what the problem is. Now, let's go to the next clip where John Kasich talks about the Democratic Party.
Here's the thing that's interesting. You know, people want me to criticize my party. Let me tell you about Democrats. I have no clue what they stand for. And we are heading into a midterm election where they are counting on the Republicans bouncing the basketball off of their foot out of bounds. And they're going to have a decent 2018, a good year. But how could you have a national political party that has no agenda? There's just no agenda, and Democrats will tell you that.
Well, what's the agenda of the Republican Party?
Listen,
I mean, right now, both parties don't seem capable of having a coherent
That's exactly why I'm saying that our young people are fed up, and why I'm saying that the prospect of a multi-party system in this country is a real possibility.
So once again, I think John Kasich is exactly right, and it's weird that he's almost helping the Democratic Party by saying this, because he is voicing what the Democrats have to do to be able to keep voters. So it's one thing to say you're the anti-Trump party, which right now that's what the Democratic Party appears to be doing. That's fine for some short-term gains. I think they are going to win a lot of seats in the midterms. But how do you keep voters if your only message is we're not the Republican Party? That only works for so long before you lose people. If you actually want to not just gain votes, but retain votes, keep those voters voting for you, you have to make promises on policy and then deliver those promises so that people will come back and vote for you again. But the Democratic Party, because right now they're just the anti-Trump party or the anti-GOP party, a lot of these voters they're getting now, they're going to lose again to apathy, because people will become disinterested with this lack of a coherent message. And once Trump is out, or once the Republicans are out of power, there's going to be a lot less energy for the Democrats to be able to get those voters out for them, unless they have a coherent agenda that actually make some promises on policy. Now, I find it funny that the only person that does have a coherent message isn't even a Democrat, Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders supports policies, like I mentioned earlier, on Medicare for all, or higher taxes on the rich and multinational corporations, or tuition-free college, policy proposals that people, the vast majority of people, want to see. Bernie has the message that the Democratic Party needs to adopt, but they're not adopting it. And that's largely because they are controlled, like the Republican Party is, by their donors. So when Big Pharma controls you, it's kind of hard to push for Medicare for all. Just like it's hard for the Republican Party to push for gun reforms when the NRA controls them. Now, let's get to the last clip here. And that's on Kasich and Hickenlooper's potential run for president.
Both of you guys are going to be out of office in about 11 months. Are you going to run for president?
You know, the moment I start talking about this, and I say it all the time, I've got an amazing cabinet working on a Swiss version.
So is that a maybe?
So we're going to focus on finishing strong, and we've got a lot to do. So what I'm doing is I haven't formed a PAC. I don't have committees all over the country. I'm not.
So it's not a yes, but it's not a no. It's a maybe.
Exactly.
And same with you.
What we're running for president?
President
Of the Lions Club.
of the United States of America.
John, I have no idea what I'm going to do when you know what? I tell you where I leave this. I'd like to have a voice. I'd like it to be constructive. I'd like it to rally people. But frankly, at the end of the day, it's in the hands of the Lord as to what my future is. Don't cut me off when I'm saying that. Listen, it's in the hands of the Lord. I don't know what he wants me to do.
Okay. Before I get to John Kasich's closing remarks there, I just have to point out that nobody cares if Hickenlooper or John Kasich runs for president. Now, I shouldn't say nobody. I'm sure they have, some supporters in both of their states. But let's just look at reality. These are two moderate politicians. Two people who are in the center of where the current political spectrum is between the Democrats and the Republican Party. Both of which, so because the Democratic Party right now is in the center and the Republican Party is so far right, these two here are essentially moderate Republicans. So there just isn't that much excitement. And look, Kasich already ran. He was the same guy before. He didn't get much support. Now, if Kasich ran as an independent, I think he might get some support just based on the gimmick of it. The fact that it would be somebody running outside of the two-party system. But whether he would be able to retain that sort of support and actually get enough people to launch any real challenge, I don't think so. Now, let's get to Kasich's closing comments. He'll run if it's something that the Lord wants him to do. I don't understand. Look, even if you're a very religious person and you think the Lord is telling you what to do, I don't understand why these politicians keep voicing it. How many times have we seen a politician say that God wants them to run for president and then they end up crashing and burning? So we have some examples of that, like Michelle Bachmann, who in 2012 said that she had that calling from God. And then there was Ben Carson in 2016, where he said he felt the fingers of God pushing him to run. And then there was Ted Cruz's dad saying that his son Ted Cruz ran for president after God sent his wife a sign. So I think the lesson here is that God is wrong a lot. And if God is wrong this often, maybe stop talking about God and his influence on what you're doing in terms of politics. Some of these people I think are phony about it. I think John Kasich is honest about it. I think he's one of these people that think that God really is interested in his potential run for president. But just don't talk about it, dude. Like, you're making yourself look like a fool, just like all these other people. And that I only mentioned 3 people. If you look up candidates that that told them God wanted them to run. There's a lot of them, and they all lost. So God doesn't have a good record on this. Now, I promise to tie this into Canadian politics, because here in Canada, we have a multi-party parliamentary system. And while the way our system works is different from the US, the prevalence or the importance of third parties on our politics is worth discussing, because it shows you that when you have a third party, then it really does have a real impact on the actual policies that get pushed forward. So I'm going to just give you one example. So right now in BC, there are three main parties. There is the NDP, the Liberals, and the Greens. Now, right now, the NDP has a government there, but they were only able to form government because of a deal with the Green Party. Now, because of that deal, the NDP had to capitulate to some of what the Green Party wanted. And a really good example that just happened recently is the Green Party and Andrew Weaver, the leader of the BC Greens, is pushing back against the LNG industry. So as the Globe and Mail reported, Mr. Weaver, whose Green Caucus holds the balance of power in the BC legislature, says he and his fellow Green MLAs are prepared to bring down the NDP government if the New Democrats breathe a positive word about developing liquefied natural gas industry in the speech from the throne 3 weeks from now. And 3 weeks later, there was no mention of the LNG industry in the speech. So I mean, this is just one example. I was also going to get into right now, for people that are following Canadian politics, there is I don't know how to explain it. A discussion, a debate, tensions around the BC NDPs and the Alberta NDP about the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion and the Green Party's effect on the inability for the NDP to approve that as well. But point being, the Green Party has a real impact right now in BC. And that is because the Greens are a third party in that province. And it's really hard to, I mean, this is such a small example, but it's really hard to truly describe how important it is to have a third voice in these discussions. Because right now what the US has are two false choices. You have two parties propped up by big money. And because of that, it makes it a lot harder for third parties to be able to rise up and truly represent a voice for the people. So while I'm not exactly sure how or when a third party will rise up in the US, my point is that it has to happen at some point for this wackiness to end. There really needs to be a third party. I hope it's not John Kasich leading that third party. Please, to the Lord, I hope the Lord tells him, no, John Kasich, don't do it. Because in many ways, he might just disrupt the potential of an actual third party rising if he tries to come in and pretend that the center should be a third party, which is what I think he would do, and it would be a big mistake. But regardless of all that, I'm glad that the discussion of third parties is now rising to the level that even people like John Kasich and John Hickenlooper are talking about it. Hey, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider throwing me a few bucks on Patreon at patreon.com/therationalnational or therationalnational.com/join.